Thank you, choir. And thank you, Ryan, for that choice of song. It was good. And let me say to all of you that I am really happy to be back here at Desert Skies. I looked at my records, and I think I was here last Labor Day weekend. But it's always a pleasure to be here and to see some old friends that I've had over the years. Would you pray with me, please? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, as Ken mentioned at the beginning of the service, Desert Skies begins a new series today called Come to the Table. And you will spend September through the 1st of October exploring the Lord's table, the table that Jesus opens to everyone. You will also practice that open table each week at both the 8:30 and 10 o'clock service, where communion will be served. Today's feature of the table is hospitality, and as I pointed out at children's time, there's that word across the altar rail. Our Roman passage in the wording of the Message version, which you heard, says, "Be inventive in hospitality." What a great way to express that. I really love it. Creativity and hospitality necessarily go together. That needs of the moment and of the people you find yourself near change. Thus, what hospitality looks like changes depending on the situation. Like the tool that can be used in several ways depending on the need at hand, which I understand you heard about in Moments for All Ages last week. Likewise, hospitality takes different forms and requires inventiveness. It's clear that what Paul has in mind is talking about hospitality is not inviting your friends over for dinner. Remember last week, present your bodies as a living sacrifice? Our verses from Romans today about how we treat other people expand on what it means to sacrifice our bodies on behalf of the body. True hospitality is uncomfortable, radical, and even sacrificial at times. It stretches us, may stretch others, and is part of overcoming evil with good. Hospitality can be a battleground, the best kind of battleground. Now, I grew up in western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. When I was in 5th grade, my family moved into a house next to the Simmers family. Now, the husband, Elmer, was born and raised in our area and lived there most of his life, except for when he enlisted in the Navy and was stationed at Galveston Naval Base in Texas. And that is where he met Georgia Rodriguez, a Tex-Mex American. Their home was always a whirlwind of activity. And Georgia was always making some food or engaging in some project in which she wanted the whole neighborhood involved. There were a few folks who resented her outspoken way of communicating, but that didn't make her generosity and loving attitude waver in the least. She taught the kids and some of the parents some Spanish words and phrases. She made us different Mexican dishes. She introduced their music to us and told us of her family's history, a lot of which was very different than the kind of history from which we came. I'm sure that Georgia is the reason that I felt so comfortable when I moved to Tucson with this rich Mexican-American heritage. Georgia had prepared me without even knowing that I would ever live here. By the way, a little aside, September 15th to October 15th is Latin Hispanic Heritage Month. So be on the lookout for ways to maybe celebrate that. In addition, they had a daughter 1 year my senior, Joanne. Unfortunately, when she was 1, Joanne suffered from meningitis that resulted in her having diminished mental capacity. Georgia and Elmer never faltered. They went on to have 3 more children, and all 4 were raised with the same behavioral standards. Joanne had special schooling, but at home she was just part of the family and expected to behave as one. And they extended that same love and courtesy to other special need kids at school. When those kids got taunted by others, Joanne's siblings stepped up and spoke out. They set an example of hospitality for all of us. Get Pastor Brooke to tell you about her experience at the inn last week. If you don't know, the inn is a haven for undocumented Latin Hispanic folks who have been cleared by ICE and are waiting for transportation to their sponsor here in the United States. We overcome evil with good, not just by offering hospitality to those who are vulnerable, but perhaps even to those who contribute to their suffering. Offering hospitality to enemies, food when they're hungry or drink when they're thirsty. After all, even enemies experience human hunger and thirst. That is more effective than returning evil for evil, even if we are seeking to overcome evil. You may have seen or heard the story of the Russian soldier who was, and I'm not sure what got him into the situation, but there were some Ukrainian women who gave him a sandwich and a cup of tea and offered him their phone to call his mother in Russia. He was in tears because he was so grateful. We all have heard, kill him with kindness. But John Wesley put it this way: conquer your enemies by kindness and patience. Offering hospitality to enemies, however, cannot mean letting evil win. It's part of overcoming evil, remember? It doesn't mean overlooking evil or sin. Like you talk about with the theme of unity 2 weeks ago. The values of hospitality and unity do not mean people are welcome to act as they want at the expense of others. Allowing others or ourselves to be harmed is not hospitality, and is in fact contributing or supporting evil. If we can find ways to offer hospitality to enemies while protecting ourselves and others, that could be amazingly transformative. But it might not always be possible. Paul says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live in peace with all people. We are called to act peaceably. We are not responsible for how others might respond to that. The communion table is the uncomfortable hospitality of God. You never know who's going to be there, what they may be going to be like, what they have done. In receiving hospitality ourselves, we also must open the way for others, all others, to receive with us. Some who may come forward are uncomfortable for us, but it's not our table. It's God's table. It is Christ's table. For some of us, it may be uncomfortable to receive. Maybe we think we don't deserve it. Maybe we resist anything that's freely given as grace and charity that we don't need. But we don't receive at the table because of who we are or who we are not, but because of who God is. And we are changed in the receiving, which is a big part of the point. God is hospitable, and we respond to the mercies of God by, among other things, receiving and extending hospitality. So participating in hospitality means we also receive it graciously ourselves, like in your Ways of Witness series. You came to understand that we all must receive witness as well as offer it. Wesley's commentary on this passage encourages readers to pursue hospitality in embracing what is offered by others and in seeking opportunities to exercise it ourselves. Your closing song last week, and what it will be next week, commits to guarding dignity and saving pride. They'll know we are Christians by our love. If we are in a position to offer hospitality, but not to receive it, we place ourselves above others and may minimize their dignity and pride. Hospitality is often received from those less able to afford it monetarily than we are, but hospitality comes also with gifts of culture, friendship, and generosity that we need as much as the food or drink that's offered. My sister Kathy and my mother Lois, many years ago, related a story to me that illustrates this. They were both supporting children through two different worldwide Christian programs. They were in Ecuador visiting Javier, who had been an exchange student in my sister and brother-in-law's home. Before going, my sister Kathy talked with the administration of the organization through which she supported a young boy and got permission to visit the family. And so while they're in Quito, the capital, Javier drove them a couple hours north to this young boy's town, and they got to meet him. He gave them a tour of his school and of the town. And when they got back to his house to meet the family, it's a modest house. There's a cement floor, no carpeting. He lived there with his sister and mom and an uncle. But the mother had laid out a meal of meat and rice and a vegetable and a small dessert. Well, Kathy and Mom intuitively knew that this was not the usual fare of this family. There was no way that they could afford that kind of food at a meal, and they were feeding 3 additional adults. They also instinctively knew that any attempt to offer money or to decline the offer of the meal would have been so disrespectful. They knew that they were there, they needed to accept it with gratitude and without any comment other than muchas gracias and muy sabrosa. Thank you. Very delicious. The joy of offering food to my sister and Mom and Javier could not be taken from these folks whose resources were so different. They were happy to share their food, their culture, their homes, and their generosity. I think there's a story from Pastor Brooke that's even goes beyond the one that I just told you, because she had no prior contact of the other person who was involved. She and her son Landon were on the rim of the Grand Canyon of Oman at Wadi Gul during the semester that she coordinated a study abroad experience for students from American Christian colleges to learn about Islam and the Arab language and culture. There's a little village on the rim at the start of the Jebel Sham's balcony walk. Landon and Brooke walked down to the trail a bit and saw some magnificent views, but it was a narrow trail on and below the rim with no railings, and Landon was only 4. So they turned around and waited for the students and the other leader nearer to the village. A group of children was playing and began to invite Landon into their games. After they interacted for a little bit, a woman, and Brooke assumes that it was the mom of at least one of those kids, came closer and beckoned Brooke into the front yard, where she laid out a mat for Brooke to sit on, and she served coffee and dates. Now, dates are the quintessential item of hospitality in Oman. These two women shared no language, no history prior to those moments on the rim of the canyon, no culture except for their common humanity. She was surely Muslim and probably guessed that Brooke was not, since Brooke's head was not covered. Brooke doesn't know why the woman invited her into that space and prepared coffee and dates, and Brooke couldn't ask her because they couldn't speak each other's language and there was no interpreter. But the hospitality and affirmation of common humanity moves Brooke to this day. And perhaps the value of the experience from the woman's perspective is similar. Perhaps the woman regularly invited random visitors to the area in her yard, and that day happened to be Brooke's turn. Perhaps she never did. Maybe it was that their children could share a moment of friendship and positive experience, and she was moved to do the same with a fellow mother. Whatever it was, Brooke is grateful. Be sure to ask Brooke more about this, and as well as her experience in Uganda, where she received a can of Coke as a gift. Now that we are thinking about hospitality, God's, our own, and that of others, let us share the table of hospitality together, and let us be strengthened by God's mercies to go be hospitable ourselves. Amen.